clear the roadblocks. And that's where the fun is. Ready to take off. So this is the third step in the 5-step steps to live your life on purpose. Clear the roadblocks. And so there's a little bit, a small questionnaire for you to score. It's just a self-assessment to see, at the moment, how well you can manage your emotions and where are opportunity for growth, right? And so if you like, just very quickly, it'll take a few seconds. So you want to score 0 if you highly disagree and 10 if you highly agree. So number 1 is, I adapt to change and uncertainty very well. And next one, I know exactly what specific challenges pushes my buttons the most and what I can do about it. Next one, I rarely feel stressed, anxious, or have physical signs of stress. And the last one, I can quickly regain my internal balance and calm when I'm under pressure or going through the emotional roller coaster. And then just score yourself out of 40 and to see, and as we can see, where are some opportunity for growth and change and expansion. Okay, so we are. So this is about clearing the roadblocks. So, what do you think are 3 most highest, biggest emotional roadblocks to business or career or financial success? And you can write in the chat box if you like. Olivia, seeing them. Okay, so here is the answer. So the 3 biggest roadblocks to your career, business success, or financial success, or building your finance is fear, guilt, and shame. And I'm sure a few of you would have knew that. And so let's talk quickly about that. So fear. So why fear stops us? Why is that a roadblock? Because fear is a shrinking energy, right? When we're afraid, we literally shrink our body. We really shrink. Sometimes we go back to the fetal position. It's shrinking. It's not expanding energy. And it stops us from taking action, stop us on building our business and finances. And so the fear can be fear of putting our prices up, or asking the value that we're worth, or sometimes fear of being judged when we are speaking, being judged by our clients, judged by our audience if we're speaking on stage, fear of what other people think of our products, of our service, of our ideas. And the next 2 are really common. Is the fear that if I'm successful, people will leave me, and people, friends or families especially. So that's a very common, that's actually a values conflict in a way, because I want to be successful. I want to build a successful and profitable business, but then I'm afraid that people will leave me. So that's actually underlying, could be a values conflict and or limiting belief. And if I'm successful, I will burn out. And I'm sure quite a few of you, or at least 1 or 2 of you, will have experienced that. And because fear are based on past experiences. And so past experiences that we experience a lot of pain, and we don't want to repeat that. So I'm going to talk a bit more about fear just in a minute. So that's why fear is one of the big roadblocks. The next one is guilt. So guilt is when we perceive that we have received more than give. So it's a lack of fair exchange. And so when we feel guilty, then we tend to over-deliver and be underpaid to compensate for the perception of receiving more than giving. And so, who would resonate with that? So that's why we go over time, we, over deliver, do all whatever we can to over deliver, and very often ask for that little price. So that's why clearing guilt is really important if you want to have a successful and profitable business. The other thing is with guilt, we are also unable to delegate because we feel that we have to do everything ourselves. And then it's hard to put the feet up because we feel that we are already receiving so much. But remember, it's a perception. And also this is another very important one, is the guilt of if we over earn and over succeed our family and friends. So it's a guilt associated with fear, right? So fear, because feeling guilty that if we over earn our parents, our family, our friends, and then the fear that they might leave us. Now shame. So how shame comes in is the shame, because when we are ashamed, we want to hide, right? We want to hide ourselves. So we are afraid to be seen or heard. So guess what? You don't want to market, right? Why maybe you say, well, why don't I go on Facebook Live? Why am I not putting myself out there? Because the shame is that we want to hide. We are afraid to be seen or heard. And also shame of declaring the amount of money we want to make, because with the shame, we feel that we are not worthy of that much. Or shame that people might judge us that, wow, that's what, you are all about money. And also shame that sometimes my family is not business oriented, but I am. So it's feeding that outcast and feeding that I'm not like the rest of my family. Okay. Okay, so next I would like to introduce the breaking news, which is probably not a breaking news to most of you. You probably already know that emotions has nothing to do with reality and have everything to do with perception. Emotions equals incomplete, imbalanced, biased, lopsided perception. And so I'm just going to show you a few examples. And please type on the chat box, and now Olivier is going to read it out for me. What do you think is written there? And let's see, how many times? Okay. Great. So I will have to say that I will have to disappoint you because, voila. So that's how our perception plays games with us. Is not our fault. It's just because we have so much sensory information. We have millions, billions actually of bits of information that come through our nervous system, our sensory organs to our central nervous system. And our brain can only consciously process a very small amount, which means we leave a huge amount out. And that's why the reality that every single one of us see is not the reality. It's a very small, tiny piece of the reality. And that's why, often we go through, 2-3 people go through the same experience, but what they describe is completely different. What they see is completely different. And this is a great example. Next one is, for example, an elephant. So if we blindfold people, you take the eyesight, and then they use the touch, and they would perceive elephants as different things. One would say is a spear, when they touch the trunk. It's a fan, it's a wall. So this also shows like how our perception is incomplete. So it's not that our perception is wrong, it's just incomplete. It's really important. It's not right or wrong, it's just incomplete, because we only see a very small portion of the reality. And I love this next one. So who sees here, what you see here, who sees one upside down, one upside triangle, one downside triangle, and 3 rounds? Or does anyone see Pac-Man? What answer do we have, Olivier? No one is daring. Okay, but at the first side, it looks like there are 2 triangles, right? Like the six point star, point star, and maybe 2 Pac-Man or 3 Pac-Man or 3 circles. But what happened is there really there? Because what happened is, when we don't have all the information, we tend to fill in the blanks to create meaning. That's what our mind does. Our mind needs meaning. We need to create meaning every moment. And so even though they're actually a blank triangle, it's a blank, there's no information there, but because it's missing, and then we join the dots and we create meaning. And this is really, really important, is that our mind is a meaning creating machine. And so what happened is, and that's created emotion, because what happened is we put emotion into things, we put emotion into actions. So we put someone do an action, someone or ourselves, we do an action, a behavior, we put a meaning into it. And that's what creates the emotion, because the person that did it may have a different meaning, have a different purpose, but is we put the meaning into it, and then that's what creates emotion. And so because of the incomplete awareness, because we only see a very small part, and we tend to, whatever there's no information, we fill in to get the meaning. So what happens is we end up then creating a duality, like so everything that when we perceive things have more negative, more drawbacks, downsides is just serving us, there's pain and challenge, we now, our body responds as a negative emotion. So our body will create chemicals that feel bad. Chemicals and neurotransmitters. However, for example, we go to a wedding, or when we first meet someone that we like, when we first fall in love, because we all even fall in love with a job. So what we see is we perceive more positive, more benefits, upside, serving us, serving our highest values, pleasure and support. And so our body then creates serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, all the feel-good chemicals. And then we label that as a positive emotion. However, both negative and positive emotions, they are just incomplete awareness, because the truth is not even a circle, is a sphere. So if you imagine this is a sphere, and I love using this model of the Chinese yin and yang, because it's actually represents that if you observe in nature, in the universe, in the nature, everything has 2 sides. Everything. So the truth, the whole, is actually has 2 sides, has the black and the white. And if we will, we could say black is the negative and the white is the positive. Now, you can, there's more than that, is that you can see that in the black, there's a little white dot, meaning that in what we perceive being painful, being negative, being challenging, also had a hidden blessing, the silver lining. They have benefits to us, is serving us somehow, are necessary. And within the white, if we would consider that as being positive, pleasure, good, it also has the dark side. There's there's the dark side, there's a downside, there's a drawbacks. So how we can come back to poise and calm and dissolve the emotions, it's being able to see the whole picture. Because when we see the whole picture, we see the whole truth. It's the same thing with magnet, right? Because magnet has north and south poles, positive and negative, and no matter how small we cut the magnet, is always going to have two poles. And similar here, is depending on the perspective we look, we see two different things, yet they are part of the greater whole. And so what happens is when we are emotional, and I want you to think of time when you are stressed, fearful, when you just have this emotional shock, and you go maybe into freeze or flight and fight. So what happened is, like, we are looking through this tiny little hole. We're not really seeing much. When we dissolve the emotion by balancing our perception through different modalities, different means, this is what happens. It expands our awareness. We see a greater picture. And then we also then see more options, more choices. We become more resourceful, more creative, and more resilient. And that's why learning to manage your emotions and master your emotions is so important. So, so I'm going to go into a little bit of science. I would like to show you what happens when we're stressed. Okay, and a lot of you might are familiar with the triune brain, which is an evolutionary look in our brain in terms of evolution. So the oldest, most ancient part of our brain, which is the one in red, is the hindbrain. We also called reptilian brain, which is the survival function. Is the brainstem and the cerebellum, and it's all about our safety, our survival of the individual, survival of our physical body. So that's the hindbrain, the reptilian brain. Then in pink is the emotional functions, is the limbic system, which is the social. In the limbic system, there's also the amygdala, which is the alarm bell. It's when there's a threat. That's where the fear kicks in. So, so that's the amygdala in the limbic system. And the question is, am I loved? And the green is our executive center, executive function, which is the prefrontal cortex in humans. It's the rational, analytical side. And that's also where we make executive functions. And the question is, what can I learn from this? What can I do? And so normally, if you would look at this, imagine the green, the prefrontal cortex as the parent, as someone with the parental role. It regulates the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain, the survival function and the emotional function. So normally when it's working together well, it's like, imagine if the hindbrain and the limbic brain, they are the child. They are 6-7 years child. They are highly functioning and very powerful actually. However, they don't have the reasoning. They are not analytical, and they are all emotional. And so we need a parent, the green part, the prefrontal cortex that regulates. So what I would like to show you is a very cool thing called, and so that you don't forget, is the HAM model. So Dr. Dan Siegel, he's a psychiatrist, has come up with this HAM model. So imagine if you all have your right hand. So get your right hand and then put your thumb, fold your thumb, and then fold your other fingers over it. Okay. So imagine that. So these fingers is the green part from our previous photo. Is the green part is the prefrontal cortex. The thumb is the limbic area, is the emotional mammalian brain, And here is the brainstem, the hindbrain or reptilian brain. So normally, in every day, we are in a calm state, we are grounded, we are rational, is that everything is working together really well. So our executive center, we are connect with that, and our executive center is regulating the rest of our brain. It's like the parents are home, and there's order, there's discipline, right? Now, imagine that suddenly, for some reason, you have this big shock. Well, say someone comes to you with a gun, right? So certainly you have this huge emotional shock. So what happened is, when you have a big emotional shock, not literally, but in terms of the connection, what happened is the executive center, the prefrontal cortex actually gets disconnected. It's not physically moving, but it gets disconnected. It's like, bye-bye. And then now the parents left home, and left for the children, the limbic system and the hindbrain froze, not knowing what to do. And it's emotional. All the decisions are emotional. So that's what happens when we are in an emotional state. Imagine like the executive center, the prefrontal cortex, the parents just left, right? So all we need to do is how to re-regulate and put it back, bring back the connection. So I hope that was helpful, because that's when when you go into panic, into emotional state, is because that's what happens. There's a disconnect between the regulatory region, which is the neocortex, which is the executive center, to the emotional center of our brain, and is important. So there are different exercise. For example, breathing. Breathing is a very simple way. Deep breath, coming back to breath to calm. There are different breathing exercises. And some of the exercise I'm going to take you through, balancing our perceptions, it will bring that back to that calm and center, so that the prefrontal cortex now is reintegrated. Hope that was helpful. And as Deborah Rosman, who is the CEO of HeartMath Institute, said that if you don't manage your emotions, then your emotions will manage you, which is exactly, when we are emotional, we don't make rational decisions. We make silly decisions and take silly actions. And so when we're emotional, what happens? It drains our energy, right? We feel our low in energy, impaired decision making, creates drama and overwhelm. We feeling of not being in control, and we run around putting out fire instead of actually focusing on creating what's really meaningful, important to you. And it can also create disease in the body. So I'm going to very briefly talk about guilt and shame, and give you potentially a new concept or definition of what guilt and shame are. Because, as I mentioned before, our emotions has everything to do with our perception. And it's the lopsided perception. Is you perceiving either have more positive than negative. So it's a positive emotion, or if we see more negative than positive, then it's a negative emotion. So guilt and shame is the assumption that in the past we have caused through our motor functions, meaning that we did something with our actions, motor function action, or memory, more pain than pleasure, more negative than positive, more losses than gain, more challenges than supports to either ourselves or others. Often the guilt is towards others, and sometimes, often the shame is towards ourselves. They are slightly similar, slightly different emotions, but it's about assumption that in the past we did something through our action or inaction that have caused more pain than pleasure, more negative to others or ourselves. And fear, the definition of fear is the assumption that in the future, because the fear is into the future, so that in the future we will experience through our senses or imagination, more pain than pleasure, more negative than positive, more loss than gain, more challenges than support from ourselves or others. Now, I would like to add that even though the fear is related to future, however, it's usually most of times it's linked to an experience that we had in the past. Experience that was very painful in the past, that we wouldn't want to go there. We don't want to repeat that. And that's what's created the fear. So the fear, and in a moment it's going to become very clear, is that the fear of the future, it's always based on a painful experience that we had in the past. For example, you may have a thriving career in the corporate or a thriving business, but then you burn out. It leads to burnout, and the burnout was so painful that you don't want to go there again. So it creates this unconscious fear of, you may want to have a successful business, you want to have a successful career, you want to be profitable, build a financial wealth. However, there's this unconscious fear blocking you, because unconsciously your unconscious mind doesn't want to create that same experience, because it's now linked to experience that, yeah, when I'm successful, I burn out. Or when I'm successful, my loved one leave me. So I hope that is clear. So how do we clear guilt, shame, and fear? So this is a very simple exercise that can very quickly, is something that you can use every day on a daily basis, and will really help you to shift your perception. Because remember, we said that negative emotions is because you have stuck up more negatives, more downsides, pain, than the benefits, right? So it's just so what we want to do now, we want to stack up the positive, the benefits, the hidden blessings, the silver lining, until it's equal. We don't want it to go over either, because then we will create even further imbalance. But we want to stack up so that you actually feel, oh, the emotion actually neutralize. And so what you do is you start with the guilt. For example, you think of something that you feel guilty about, and you think, okay, what and who am I feeling guilty towards? So I'll give an example. With our current situation, Olivia's mom is in France. She's 80 years old. And now she is in lockdown in her house all by herself, because we are here in Australia, and her other son, Olivia's brother, is about 100 kilometers from home. He used to go visit her twice a week, but now he cannot do that either, because she's 80 years old. So we feel guilty that we are not there with her, supporting her. And I'm sure some of you might have that same situation. And so then we ask, okay, so we feel guilty, or I feel guilty toward his mom. So the question now is, how is this situation serving her? So how, by being on her own in her own house, on her own, because she lives by herself, how is that serving her? And she's 80 years old. But she's still very autonomic. She still drives. She lives in a small village. And so I start, okay, the benefit is she actually have to take care of herself. So she has to be resourceful. And for example, because, once a week she used to go drive and get her groceries. And, in France, people go to the bakery every day to get bread. But now she became more innovative and resourceful. She said, well, she goes to the little supermarket near her very early in the morning. There's not many people. And then she will buy this loaf of bread, split them up, and freeze them. So now she only goes out once a week, right? Other thing she has to do is she now has to mow the lawn all on by her own. She's 80 years old, and she's still doing it. She loves gardening. So that's a primary benefit. The secondary benefit is it's keeping her healthy. It's keeping her active and healthy. And then the tertiary benefits, what's a benefit of that? well, she would then stay healthy. She, keep her vital. She'll probably live longer, have a healthier life. Now, another benefit is that at 80 years old, so it's interesting because last year we went there and we brought her as a gift an iPad. And can you imagine a 80-year-old mom that never, she's never used even a computer. So we taught her how to use it, and I said, let's FaceTime, and it has been almost a year now. And we FaceTime but very few times, because most times she still rather use the phone and call. It's much easier. But now it's a lockdown, which means that she's not having other people's visit. The neighbor, she talks to the neighbors through the phone, and her other son is also not visiting. So guess what? We are now using the FaceTime much more. And it's really interesting because so she has to learn how to master that. And the funny thing is, this week, Olivier's on a call with her, and somehow she pressed a button and there was no more sound. And she was trying to figure it out and like kind of, moving the iPad everywhere. And Olivier says, no, stop, you're giving me seasick. So they hang up. And then about 10 minutes later, she called back from her iPad, say, I fixed it. So there's always the benefit. So look into the benefits. So that's the primary benefits. What's the secondary benefit? Well, she's learning something new. And do you think that she would also feel, good about herself? She is increasing her autonomy. She's increasing her resourcefulness, creativity, innovation. Okay, so that's how you create a guilt. Is you look into specifically what do you feel guilty about, and towards whom. Could be towards your mom, towards your partner, and then what is the primary benefit of that, and then what's the benefit of that with the secondary and the tertiary benefit. Okay, now there's a different way. So this is more for like sequential people that rather sequential. Another way of doing that is like a mind map, which you start with the guilt in the middle, and then you have the blue ones is the primary benefits, and then you go secondary benefits and tertiary benefits, and you keep going until you feel the emotions clear. So I hope that is useful. It's something that you can use at everyday basis, and that we use at the everyday basis whenever is needed. Okay, now there is a little gap. So it's a great exercise. However, there's a little gap, like is not complete, because what happened is I would like to introduce the notion that our emotions, because that exercise you have to use your cognitive processing. So you have to have a memory, you have your cognitively processing. However, what happens is every emotion that we go through life, or every emotional experience has two components. It has what we call the explicit memory, which is stored in our mind. So this is part that we have the conscious awareness, we have the story, the content and context, the narrative. But there's also an implicit part of the memory, which is totally unconscious, and it just shows up as a form of energy blockage in our body. So all the cognitive processes cannot assess and address the implicit memories. And that's why sometimes some people may have done a lot of work, a lot of therapy, personal development work, but they feel that there's still something there, there's still a gap. Is because the unconscious, deep-seated, somatically imprinted memories, they are still there. So they still trigger. So to give an example, is imagine, so you see the iceberg, and that is the cluster. So unconscious might tend to put all our emotional experiences, unresolved emotional experiences of similar quality, of similar issues in a cluster. And if we look in the bottom of the we have the original event, which is usually deeply unconscious. The bottom of the iceberg is deeply unconscious, and is usually before the age of 3. So we don't have a conscious memory. Very often we go all the way back to before birth. Then the second one, which is original explicit event, which is usually early childhood, between 6, 7 years old up to 10 years old. And then we have a current issue. So what happens, whatever current issue we are facing, it's like a lead, it's a trigger that we can trace it back all the way to the origin, to the original event. And so in the last 10 years, with all the different modalities and personal development, energy healing, I have created a modality, a process called NEI, Neuro Emotional Technique, which allows us to take a current issue and then trace it back by using the body's biofeedback. So we are actually working with the body, not with the conscious mind, trace back to the original explicit memory, which is in early childhood, and then trace back to the very deeply unconscious memory, which very often could be around birth or even in the womb. And by resolving the very first event, the very first, where the root cause, when we integrate that event, then it has a ripple effect all through the line, and having a shift in, having an effect all the way to today, changing our, completely shifting that emotion. And so just to give you a very quick example, is that one of my clients, and she gave me permission to use her case study, is a client I've been working with a number of years. She's a very, she's a young businesswoman. And so one of the issues that she came to me a few months back was that she wants to spend her business. She has already a pretty good thriving business, but she wants to spend, but she just keeps finding herself sabotaging it and not taking it to the next level. So when we look at it, what came up was that she has this belief that she had this limit, the belief that, if I'm successful, I'll lose my loved ones. People leave me, my friends, my family. And then we trace back to, I was 5 years old, where there was an event where her mom moved with her and her brother to the countryside, leaving her 2 half siblings with the father. And so there was 2 emotions there. One is she felt something that was positive, because she loved going and living on the countryside. She loved that, but she felt guilty about leaving the siblings behind. So there was a guilt there. Then we traced back to 6 months old in the womb. And what came up was that she perceived that that at the moment, her mom was giving her enormous love, but was rejecting her dad. So she had this guilt about receiving so much love from her mom, and the guilt also because she felt that her dad was being pushed away. So when we cleared the original event at 6 months in the womb, and the shift, the ripple effect that it had, so this is what a testimonial that we didn't expect that, but she wrote me a testimonial after a few weeks after. And so basically she says that, during one of our sessions, we healed a guilt that she'd been carrying her entire life, 32 years. And the guilt was around receiving her mom's love when she was 6 months in the womb. The emotional shift in the session was powerful, but what happened in the 8 weeks that followed was even more powerful and unexpected. A stream of clients suddenly show up, and she effortlessly generated more than $48,000 in business, and nearly half of those clients paid for their package in full, which have never happened before in the 12 years she's been in business. And so she said there's no doubt in her mind that the session and clearing those emotional deep-seated emotions, deep-seated unconscious emotions, has enabled her to open up and receive what she wants, including achieving her financial goals. And just quickly, so this is another general testimonial, is that every time that we did an EI session, she has experience that has enabled her to tap into solutions to problems, experience emotional healing, and receive ideas for her business and life. And that also helped her to sleep better, heal her body, and make significant decisions that have helped her to move forward. So this is, so that's about the roadblocks. And so this is the emotional roadblocks. And I just want to briefly touch on the other roadblocks that actually Olivier already touched on those on part 1. So one is values conflict. When we have two values, two things are high on our values, however, they are conflicting. And the most common one that we observe both in men and women is business and family. And it's more, especially in women, but it's very common in both, is business and family or business and relationship. So very often women that have a high value in business or their career or their business, and they will end up not being able to also have a thriving relationship, because not that you cannot have both together, is that in their perception, they are separate. And so there are some linking exercise that we can do to resolve that, so that to link them together. And the other one is unrealistic expectation, that we also extensively explore that on part 1, and has to do with your goals not being aligned with your highest values. So by creating the emotional roadblocks, we expand our perception, because remember, we go from a tiny hole to we actually expand our awareness, expand our perception. Then naturally, because then we have more choices, so we naturally change our actions and create an appropriate strategy. So we go from this to this. So we see the bigger picture. We see there's so much more options and resourcefulness and resilience. And so basically, then we remember that then our executive center, our prefrontal cortex, is in place, is working together with our mammalian brain and our hindbrain. So when we are functioning in the executive state, that's when we are calm and grounded and present, balanced. So when we function in an executive state rather than an emotional or survival state, we are the most efficient and effective in achieving our goals.